Okay. All right. Shabbat Shalom. We are back. We are live. We want to continue with our look at the book of Bereshit. We are going to be looking at Genesis 29. We'll look at the entire chapter. I think what we're going to do is probably how I have it set up here is we'll read some and I'll talk about it some and then we'll read some more instead of reading the whole thing and then going back and like that. So we have for us today, we got this already set up for us to do it in that way anyway. So if we just go ahead through this, see if I get my cursor where it needs to be at over here. Wait a second. That's not advancing. Oh, there we go. Spacebar. Okay, so we are today talking about Vayisa Yaakov, which is and Jacob went, and the marriage. So we'd be dealing with the 29th chapter of Bereshit, which begins with and Jacob went, and we'll be just looking at marriage partially in the chapter, and we'll have a little more after we get through the chapter. So we're going to begin by, hope that's not too small. We'll begin by reading what we have there, one through five, yeah.
And Yaakov moved on and came to the land of the people of the east. And he looked and he saw a well in the field, and saw 3 flocks of sheep lying by it. For out of that well they watered the flocks, and a large stone was on the well's mouth, and all the flocks would be gathered there. They would roll the stone from the well's mouth and water the sheep, and put the stone back in its place in the well's mouth. So Jacob said to them, My brothers, where are you from? And they said, We are from herein. And he said to them, Do you know Laban, son of Nahor? And they said, We know him.
Actually, keep on going. Keep reading.
Okay. So he said to them, Is he well? And they said, Well, and see, his daughter Rachel. Wait.
Yeah.
How you say that, Rahel?
That's Rachel.
Rahel.
It's like a.
Rahel is coming with the sheep. And he said, See, it is still high day, not the time of the livestock to be gathered together. Water the sheep and go feed them. But they said, We are not allowed until all the flocks are gathered together, and they have rolled the stone from the well's mouth, then we shall water the sheep. Uh, while he was still speaking with them, Rachel came to her father's with her father's sheep, and for she was a shepherdess. And it came to be when Jacob saw Rachel, the daughter of Laban, his mother's brother, and the sheep of Laban, his mother's brother, that Jacob went near and rolled a stone from the well's mouth and watered the flock. Laban, his mother's brother, of his Laban, his mother's brother.
Okay, very good. That's good right there for now. Okay, so it's interesting as we look at Yaakov as he's going, where we see when it's time for both Yaakov and Yitzhak to look for wives that they end up basically in the same place dealing with the same exact family. We talked about this a little bit before with this whole idea of family and close relations and so on. But I think again, when we think about this kind of in terms that we can deal with now, we understand that when it comes, I'm saying at least for those that are searching anyway, some of us have already searched and found. But I'm saying for our children coming up, right? We really should send our young people to get with those that are like-minded, those that are already striving to be with the Most High, those that are already walking on the side of righteousness. Because when you don't do that, you just asking for problems. Not to say that you can't go out here and find some person and that's says that they're willing to change or whatever, but you really rolling the dice when you do that. You know what I mean? I think that wisdom tells you to not be unequally yoked, right? And so the what we will be able to learn from what's going on over here is that he's not looking on the outside for for his mate, right? He's staying on the inside. I'm saying, like I said, when we think about this now, the close proximity that these relatives was is something that we wouldn't be doing obviously in this time. But I'm saying that the concept is there in terms of going and getting those that are relatives in the sense of they are connected to Messiah, right? And we definitely see that over here. But I didn't want to stop at that. I want to look at 11 through 13 and talk about some of the things that we see going on with this particular story. I just wanted to re-say that again, just because the same kind of thing happened again. But let's look at some of the specifics of this chapter and this encounter between the forefathers, because we want to be able to look at this and understand kind of the processes even of marriage, and then being able to apply it back to what we see with Yaakov, and also its kind of spiritual significance. So we'll try to get into all of those things, but let's look at 11 through 13. Read that.
So then Yaakov kissed Rachel and lifted up his voice and wept. And when Yaakov told Rachel that he was her father's relative and that he was with the son, she ran and told her father. And it came to be that Laban heard the report about Yaakov, his sister's son, that he ran to meet him and embraced and kissed him and brought him into his house, him to his house. And then he told Laban all these matters.
Okay, so let's do this. When we look at this thing, this whole kissing thing, right? Yaakov going and kissing Rachel. When we look at the Hebrew, that word is nashach, through the idea of fastening up, to kiss, literally or figuratively touch. Also a mode of attachment to equip with weapons, armed men, rule kiss touch. And so when we look at this a little closer, we see that the verb that means literally to kiss, it also means to touch lightly. And so this over here says the word rarely has romantic implications. Often along with tears and embracing kisses expresses the dearness of relationships between friends and family, especially at a farewell. And then there's various examples that is going through over there. But the point that I wanted to bring out is the fact that whatever Yaakov did to Rachel at this point, the same thing happened between him and Laban, right? And so we don't want to kind of think that he just went up to this lady and just kind of like got in. He wasn't like slobbering her down, like right. It wasn't. It wasn't like this big thing, right? But it was kind of like a greeting kind of a thing. I will say that I think that well, I'm saying like for me, I generally don't even care necessarily to even touch other women besides my wife. And if so, maybe it'd be like a little handshake or something like that. Just for kind of, modesties and separation sakes. Especially other people's wives. You know what I mean? But when we look at this, and there's a few things that we'll go over when we're going through this, there's a lot of things that's outside of our cultural context that we see going on, and we think about it from our cultural context, and then we don't understand everything that's going on because we're thinking about it in our ways and they're doing other things. So even when if we don't even look at the definition of the word over here, we can see that whatever he did with her, the same thing happens with Laban. And we we wouldn't think that was some kind of an inordinate thing, I would say, that happened with Laban. It was just kind of like that's how they kind of dealt with each other, kind of just how you see those. I don't know if it's exactly like how you see, but I'm saying as an example how you see these people when they do them little air kisses with each other. It's whatever I'm saying. Whatever this kiss was, it wasn't like this kind of a romantical kind of a thing. It was just like a greeting kind of a thing that they was going through over here. Okay, so let's keep on going. Let's go from, let's see, what is that? 14, 15, 16. Read from 14 to 17.
And Laban said to him, "You are indeed bone of my flesh." And he stayed with him for a new moon. And Laban said to Yaakov, "Because you are my relative, should you therefore serve me not? Let me know what should your wages be." And Laban had two daughters. The elder was Leah, and the younger was Rachel. It says, and Leah's eyes were weak, but Rachel was beautiful of form and beautiful of appearance.
Okay, so let's talk about verse 17 some, because a lot of times it's interesting that even I kind of thought about it sometimes in this way. When we look at the fact where it talks about Leah's eyes were weak, you know, we know that Leah was the older of the two daughters, right? We don't know what the actual age difference was, but she was older. So when we think about her eyes being weak, sometimes you might think about, you know, like old ladies, kind of like, you know, old people in general, maybe their eyes start to go bad, right? So we might think about Leah like she was like this old woman over here, you know, because it talks about her eyes were weak. So I wanted to look at that some, because when we look at this, that word rock, it means tender, literally or figuratively, weak, faint, soft, tender, or tender-hearted, or weak. And so when we look at this thing, that means this word that means gentle, tender, weak. It can be indecisive. When we look at this, I think comparatively is the way I think that we need to look at this, because it talks about Rachel in terms of her being beautiful of form and appearance. So it talks about Leah's eyes were weak. And then it talks about Rachel. It says, but Rachel was beautiful of form and beautiful of appearance. And so when we look at, I think the King James, I think what the King James does, what did the King James say in that Genesis? I don't think it says Genesis 29, 17. It says what? 17. What do it say? Leah's eyes was tender. Oh, it says she was tender-eyed, and Rachel was beautiful form and beautiful in appearance. Oh, it says tender-eyed, beautiful, and well-favored. It says of Rachel. But in all actuality, that well over there is actually beautiful. So it's talking about her beautiful her beautiful form and her beautiful appearance. That word literally is beautiful, but the word that's translated as form, which is to'ar, is figure or appearance, countenance, resemblance, visage. So basically, when we look at this, it's almost as if, you know, they're dealing with Rachel as being like just beautiful in every way. Like he's just looking at her, and there's just nothing that he can see that's unfavorable as relates to Rachel, right? She's beautiful in every way. But when we look at some of the things that some of the commentators, also as well as what the rabbis offer about Leah being tender-eyed, is used more in an idiomatic sense, and not necessarily that her eyes were weak because she was older. To say that she was tender-eyed is simply telling you that her physical quality was. She had beautiful eyes. Now, Rachel, everything about her was beautiful, form, appearance. Rachel was Yafat To'ar, beautiful in her shape, person, look, gait. Gait is like the way that she walked was beautiful. Yafet Mareh, beautiful in her countenance. And so The only thing that they was able to say about Leah that was only good thing I guess they could say, especially comparatively speaking, was to say, well, you know, she has nice eyes. But this Rachel, she just was just out of this world in terms of her beauty.
She was coming like gorgeous.
She just was everything, right? And so when we look at this, even from this we kind of see kind of the beginnings of kind of the partiality that went between Rachel and Leah. You know, that we see right or wrong, you know, with you know, how he dealt with these two who ended up being his wives. Okay, so Genesis, read from 18. Oh, look, the answer. Look, read 29, 18 through 21. 29, 18 through 21.
And Jacob loved Rachel, so he said, "Let me serve you 7 years for Rachel, your younger daughter." And Laban said, "It is better that I give her to you than I should give her to another man. Stay with me." So Jacob served 7 years for Rachel, and they seemed to him but a few days because of the love he had for her. Then Jacob said to Laban, "Give me my wife, for my days are completed, and let me go in to her." And Laban gathered all the men of the place and made a feast. And it came to be in the evening that he took Leah his daughter.
Oh wait, hold on real quick. Let's I don't know what verse I said, but I should have just said.
Oh, you said 21. My bad. I'm on 21.
Okay, so when we look over here, it talks about how Yaakov, it says, loved Rachel. And so interesting. So we'll talk about this whole idea with love and so on. But when we look over here at Yaakov, and you know his desire for the younger daughter, and Laban and his apparent agreeableness with the idea of giving away his younger daughter, we see over here a kind of an agreement that's made between Yaakov and Laban in terms of you know what Yaakov must do in order to acquire the wife. I mean his to be wife. So we see over here this idea of an agreement. We see over here the idea of a payment that's given for a bride. We talked about this, you know, before, I think, with the whole idea of, you know, people, you know, how we operate today is a lot different than how we see in the old times, or even or especially dealing with you know, from a Hebraic standpoint, in terms of the young ladies and the women having a covering and going from a covering to a covering, right there. And when we say covering, one thing that we can think about is an idea of protection. And so the woman is always protected. And we can see that a little bit over here with this whole idea with the Yaakov dealing with Laban in regards to his daughter and him in search for a wife, where it wasn't like he just saw her somewhere and then just that was just it. Like he literally had to go and deal with Laban before he was able to move forward. He wasn't able just to just take her and just be with her without going through the proper channels. And then even when we look through these verses, we see that there's an agreement, and we see that there's a payment all involved in these verses over here as it relates to this servitude and what he's going to get as a result of the servitude. I want to look at, just because it's mentioned over there, the fact that it says that he loved Rachel. He loved her, right? And that word is ahav, to have affection for, whether it be sexually or otherwise. When we think about love, I think that we think about it kind of from an emotional standpoint a lot of times, but I think it's such a thing that's so kind of vast. We probably always don't think about it in its fullness. Now, if we look over here, this is Webster's 1828, where it says an affection of the mind excited by beauty and worth of any kind, or by the qualities of an object which communicate pleasure, sensual or intellectual. So when we think about that in terms of this affection of the mind that's excited by something, we're talking about something that's reactional, right? If it's something that's beautiful or some type of worth or that we place on the thing, we're having some type of a reaction to it. Some people love cinnamon, right? Some people hate cinnamon. But you have this relationship with the thing based on something, right? Based on whatever worth that you put on the thing, that you agree is there or isn't there. It says that it is opposed to hatred. Love between the sexes is a compound affection consisting of esteem, benevolence, and animal desire. Love is excited by pleasing qualities of any kind, as by kindness, benevolence, charity, and by the qualities which render social intercourse agreeable. In the latter case, love is ardent friendship or a strong attachment stringing from good will and esteem, and the pleasure derived from the company, civilities, and kindness of others. Between certain natural relatives, love seems to be, in some cases, instinctive. So when we think about something that's going on instinctively, now we're kind of talking about it from a different standpoint, where it's not something that's reactional. Well, I guess it kind of is reactional if you're talking about relatives, like children, for instance. They not that they've done anything, but I guess the connection, the response, I guess, is the fact that they actually came from you. So even at that is still kind of a responsive thing. We're saying that it's instinctual, where it's something that's just connected to your internal workings. But I guess if you think about it long enough, there's still kind of a cause and effect kind of a thing, because that's something that you made, that came out of your body, right? So But I'm saying that when we think about it in that way, I think there's a better, I would say, thought about what love is, because especially with children, they can do things that you don't want for them to do,
Right.
but then you still love them though. They can really kind of work your situation, right? But in spite of themselves, you're still able to deal with them in love. And so we can kind of get kind of a picture of a different picture, I would say, not to say that emotional emotional reactional love isn't love, because it is, but I'm saying that it's a fuller kind of a thing. Love can be kind of manifest in these different ways, right? Okay, so also with this definition over here, the love of Elohim, it says, is the first duty of man, and this springs from just or right views of his attributes or excellencies of character, which afford the highest delight to the sanctified heart. Esteem and reverence constitute ingredients in this affection, and a fear of offending him is its inseparable effect. And so when we think about the love of Elohim, him towards us and us towards him, I think for us, as it talks about here, in terms of our affection for him and our desire to kind of stay in his quote unquote good graces, or that fear that we have for the Most High, is how we express our love. But I gotta, what's the scripture where it talks about how um it's in the New Testament where it says that while while you was yet in sin, he sent forth his only son, something like that. Somebody find that verse, because that thought process deals with the fact that the Most High is loving us when we're in a state that don't deserve his love, right? And so when we couple that with 1 John 4, 7 and 8, I don't want to give you two tasks at once, but can you read 1 John 4, 7 and 8?
So, beloved ones, let us love one another, because love is of Elohim, and everyone who loves has been born of Elohim and loves Elohim. The one who does not love does not know Elohim, for Elohim is love.
It says that Elohim is love. Elohim is love. It said, beloved ones, let us love one another. Love is of Elohim. Love is of him. And he is love. And so when we think about what love is, and it's over here telling us that Elohim is love, for me, when I think about, I guess, real love or true love, I think of it from the idea of the fact that if the Most High is love, then I have to think about love in that way, where it's something that's beyond kind of this reactional thing. Because if we're able to find that verse, what did it say?
Romans 5:8.
No, what the verse say?
Oh, but Yah commended his love toward us, in that while we were yet sinners.
Hold on, what did it say? Commanded is? Say that again.
It says commended.
Oh, commended. Okay.
Let me get another translation.
No, that's fine. I just did what it.
Commended his love toward us, in that while we were yet sinners, Yeshua died for us.
Yeah. Okay, so when we think about that verse, it goes along with the idea of understanding what real love is. Well, we could look at that verse where he's talking about the fact that while we were yet sinners, he did the thing that's going to connect us back to him. We're not in right standing. We're not living the way that we're supposed to live. We can't live that way. But yet he made for us a way through Yeshua to be able to come back to him. Above that, if we think about the fact that Yeshua being slain from the foundation of the earth, if he's slain from the foundation of the earth before it even became necessary for his sacrifice to be made, it was made. So it didn't have nothing to do with what we were doing, right? So it's not kind of a reactional thing, because if we talk about from the foundation of earth, then nothing happened yet, right? He's doing something like ahead of time. It's like a preemptive strike, right? Love really is just that. It's a preemptive strike, right? I'm setting the stage. I'm doing something and I'm being a certain kind of way, and that's what I'm being. And it's not based on you necessarily. And so one thing that I wanted to think about when we think about Yaakov, where it talks about him loving Rachel, and it's obviously kind of this physical kind of a thing over here. You know, he has all this wonderful things to say about Rachel, and this other one over here, Leah, she's, you know, she got nice eyes, right? It's kind of this external kind of a thing going on, based around this kind of reactional, emotional, kind of physical love that he has for the younger, more beautiful daughter, right? Okay, so let's keep on going. We want to talk about this some more. Read from 22 through 25.
And Laban gathered all the men of the place and made a feast. And it came to be in the evening that he took Leah his daughter and brought her to Yaakov, and he went into her. And Laban gave his female servant Zephel to his daughter Leah as a female servant. And in the morning it came to be that see, it was Leah. So he said to Laban, "What is this you have done to me? Why is not Rachel that I served you? Why have you deceived me?"
Okay, so it's interesting that we talked about first the idea of Yaakov going back over here to Laban to find a wife, and also because of the relationship. I'm saying the close relationship in terms of being relatives. I'm saying, and we can see over here that there's a definite connection between what we see with Rebecca and Laban in terms of them having these ideas of identity theft, in these kind of pivotal, important moments. And so when we look at, this, which says, "Why then have you deceived me?" That word is to hurl or to shoot, to delude, which is some ancient English word that I don't know what it means, so I had to look up. To deceive, to impose on, to lead from truth or into error, to mislead the mind or judgment, to beguile, to cheat in general, applied to deception and bargains, delude to deception and opinion, An artful man deludes his followers. We are often deluded by false appearances. And so when we look at this over here, when we see this whole idea, they made this agreement. Yaakov and Laban did. They made this agreement. He worked these 7 years, for Rachel. And then we see over here. So first of all, you make an agreement, and there's a price. So the price actually was built into the agreement because it was servitude, right? And then so you have that period of betrothal where the one is promised, the daughter's promised to the man, and then you have the wedding kind of ceremony feast week. And so you have, like, we go to these weddings nowadays, and it's this big ordeal, and it lasts a couple hours. But this thing, the joining was a whole week. And part of the joining was, you went into the room and you came together for the first time. It was part of the whole situation. And so I don't know if it was, if it was just that it was really dark, or it was the veil was really thick. Because what we do know is that, first of all, he was there a month. He was there a month already. If we look, what verse was that where it said that he was 14? He stayed with him for a new moon, for a whole month. And then now he's after that happened, there's 7 years. So you got 7 years and a month, right? Where he's in the house, where he would know who's who. I remember in my younger days, I wore glasses probably since I was in middle school, but I never could get glasses that I thought looked cool, so I wouldn't wear them. And so so back in the day, not walking around, with glasses, I literally was able to know people based on how they were kind of built and walked, because my eyes were so bad, you know what I mean, where I wouldn't wear glasses, but that's what I had to do to get around. I could tell how people's gait, how they walked, their kind of their physical kind of stature, how they was, certain characteristics that you was able to see that you didn't need for them to be close up, that I was able to look to. I'm saying I did all that, with people who I just would passively see around the neighborhood. What about literally being with somebody for a whole 7 years and a month? Like, you seem like you would get to the place where you kind of know enough. Voice, look, I don't know, smell even, maybe, I don't know. I mean, it's a lot over here. It's a lot that goes into this whole thing over here. But for me, and this is just my thoughts on the matter, for me, I think that it kind of speaks to something, probably I would say on a more spiritual level, I would say. Because again, we think about Rachel, the description that we have is this physical thing, right? She's physically beautiful. She's everything. But Leah has these other beauties that are obviously internal. The thing that makes her eyes so beautiful think you're able to see into her inner being, right? So I'm saying that potentially we have over here kind of this spiritual connection that at that time where, I mean, I would think that once I knew that this wasn't who you said it was, then we got to kind of put the brakes on the situation. Like, but there wasn't nothing that stopped him. I'm saying so much so where he's all the way till the next day where he's like, wait a second, this ain't the one. Like, so I'm saying, there's deception involved, but I think we also have to think about the divine providence that's involved, and these other things that we are able to see kind of beneath the surface in terms of these things that we see with the differences with the two sisters, their whatever strengths or weaknesses or strong points or what have you. Let's see. Okay, so okay, anybody have any thoughts or questions or comments about any of this stuff we talking about over here before we keep going?
I have a couple quick ones. Just what happened to Jacob with the Leah situation was almost like payback for what he had did in deceiving his father. And then I wanted to just get clear on, so
you gonna talk about something else? Because I want to piggyback off of what you're saying. Is you about to say something more about that?
No, not about that.
Okay,
go ahead.
I want to piggyback off of that because I did think about that. I agree, and I think that that's something that we should probably think about. I know it's true with children. It's funny, Bill Cosby talked about this in his little himself thing, that little comedy thing that he had a long time ago. But the things that you do to your parents, your kids are going to do back to you tenfold. It's going to happen right back to you. But that's true just in regular life. Yeshua said you reap what you sow. The things that we do, you can you can get over on somebody, but guess what? Somebody gonna come back around and get right back over on you. And so we see that that's a perfect example of that. He's sitting up here. They literally did something that the result is what the Most High wanted, but the way they went about it, you can't necessarily say that. They went around the corner in order to get to the place where the Most High said where they were supposed to be at. And so in that, like, what's the difference? It's the exact thing. You got this body double situation. It's the exact thing that he did comes right back around.
And it's like, and it both, like your illustration about how, you couldn't see. So his father's eyes was dim, right? He couldn't see. And so obviously what happened with his consummation had to do with him not being able to see. So it's like the same scenarios. And that's what I was going to ask about the whole wedding thing. Do they have ceremonies before the consummation, or is consummation the ceremony?
Well, I think what they did was, again, you have your betrothal, which is the time that goes by after you've made an agreement on a payment. And so the ceremony, you have the consummation piece, and I think that's the beginning of the week. So you have the consummation piece, and then you party for the whole week. And then so we even say once your week is over, I think we read that part. Once your week is over, then now you can start working on the other daughter. because it begins at that consummation part. So I think if it was reversed, that would be even worse, where they have like a party together where and then at the end, I'm pretty sure how it goes is that's the beginning part is the consummation part. And then when they come out and they have the little rag with the proof on it, they go ahead and finish celebrating and party for a week. Yeah. Okay, so I mean, there's a lot going on, but we see now. I mean, when you think about that in that way, it just rings true to what Yeshua talks about. It's just a thing. You reap what you sow. It's a natural thing. And you just can't get around it. And that's a perfect example of that right there. Okay, so let's keep on going over here. Let's read 26 through 30.
And Laban said, "It is not done this way in our place to give the younger before the firstborn.
Oh, here's it right here.
Complete the week of this one, then we will give you this one too, for the service which you shall serve with me still another 7 years." And Yaakov did so and completed her week. Then he gave him his daughter Rachel too as wife, and Laban gave his female servant Bilhah to his daughter Rachel as a female servant, and he also went into Rachel, and he also loved Rachel more than Leah, and he served with Laban still another 7 years.
Okay, so there's a couple things we see over here. Again, when we think about this whole idea of marriage, again, when you're betrothed, you're married, but you don't dwell together. There's a contract that's made. That's your betrothed wife. If somebody was to come and take your betrothed wife in the city where she could cry out, that man dies because he took another man's betrothed wife, even though they wasn't dwell. Even we see over here where it said, then he gave him his daughter Rachel too as wife. And then he did the 7 years. Right? So they didn't dwell together, I'm saying, it's in terms of being official until after the 7 years went past. But that was his betrothed wife. They made a contract. The payment was at the fulfillment of the 7 years, which was what the agreement was. And then after that was passed, they would be able to dwell together then. And so, and I thought we'd read it already, but we just looked at it over here in terms of the fact of completing the week of this one, where it says that complete the week of this one in terms of Leah. He comes out the next day like, what is this? This ain't what we talked about. This is Leah. I want Rachel. He's like, well, it's kind of messed up to me. It seems like when you look at it, he's just like, whatever. Like, it's that's what it is. Like, you can take this other one, but you got to put the time in now. And then even if you go back, right? What's wrong with Laban? When you go back at verse 14, where it says, and Laban said, you are indeed my bone and my flesh. And he stayed with him a new moon. Laban said to Yaakov, because you are my relative, you should therefore serve me for naught. Let me know what should be your wages. It seems as if he's like, is he being nice to them? Or is he just like hustling him like the whole time?
He sound like one of those
like what's he doing?
Sound like Slap Rock.
Hustling and all that.
What's wrong with Laban? I'm just saying, Laban, the way this, when we look at verse 26 through 30, just the way that it goes through is not apologetic, right? It just is what it is. Like, you got Leah. We don't do that over here. We don't give away our younger one before the older one. That's just not what we do. Even though I agreed to it earlier.
Yeah.
Right?
Not in our place.
This is not what we do over here.
Don't get down like that.
Like, why wouldn't why is he being like that?
You could have said it from the beginning. Like, okay, well, you have to take Leah first.
Right.
Yeah, sure.
All right. And so it's deceit all the way around, but it's unapologetic deceit at that.
Yeah.
It's just like he don't even care. Like, it seems. That's what I'm looking at it. Like, he don't care about that's your problem. You want the other one 7 more years.
He went after what he wanted.
But yeah. Okay, so but what I don't know what's wrong. So when we look over here, it says in regards to Rachel, it says that he loved her more. It says verse 30, and he also went to Rachel, and he also loved Rachel more than Leah. So it's not that, just based on this verse over here, it's not that he didn't love her. However, comparatively speaking, he favored Rachel over Leah. And we're just saying that based on verse 30, where it says, and he also went to Rachel and also loved Rachel more than Leah. He served another 7 years. But verse 31, read verse 31 there. What that say?
I said, y'all saw that Leah was unloved, and he opened her womb, but Rachel was barren.
Okay, so the scripture says unloved, right? The King KJV says hated.
Mm-hmm.
KJV says hated. He hated Leah, it says. Interesting. That word, sane, which means to hate personally, enemy, foe, be hateful or hater, odious, utterly. And so that's harsh right there, right? Hate. So why does the scriptures soften that over there and say unloved, where that word literally says it says hate? We look at that definition, like, you can't even soften it based on the definition, right?
I wonder if that's the same hate that Esau had, or he hated
Same
the
word.
blessing that he got.
It's the same word.
I think
So much parallel right here.
Yeah,
It's the same word, yeah.
but I think he kind of like more like, I'm putting myself in his shoes on my perspective. He might have hated her because of the fact that he knew he got played. I mean, every time he looked at her, I can't stand you. Or your uncle, what he did.
But already though, we see from verse 30 there's a difference, right? In verse 30, it didn't say that he didn't love Leah. And then even when you look at the Hebrew, there's a prefix attached to the name of Leah, which is giving you the idea of more. So when the translators say loved Rachel more than Leah, it's giving you that idea of more in terms of a comparison. So if I love one more than the other, I still love them, but it's just not as much. But then right when we get right to the next verse, you got the sanah word. So when we look over here, I talked about this a little earlier, when we view this outside of the Hebraic mind and Hebraic context, we miss the hyperbolic view of certain words, phrases, and statements. Hyperbole. 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 If I sit up here and say, I don't mess with you like that. That's hyperbole. Like mess. I'm using a word, but I'm not using it all the way, kind of in the way that it's defined. Like, that's you saying something in a hyperbolic way. When we think about the Hebrew, is full of idiomatic statements where you're using things, as idioms. When you could say a word, and we just looked over at this word that's translated as hate, and it literally means hate, and so much so, if you go and look up the hundreds of places where this word is used, you'll be hard pressed to find it in a place where it's not talking about literal hate. But the only reason why I'm backing off of that is just, first of all, based on the fact that we have even a difference, just even with the two verses, just 30 and 31, how I went from more love all the way to hate. And then also what we end up seeing later, which we'll talk about. But continuing on with this over here, to love is used of the exercise of the greatest possible care for whatever is the object of the love. To hate is used in the opposite sense, or exercising less care or of neglect. To hate is an idiom of preference, not hatred as we understand it. So we could look at this and say that hate is not hate necessarily how we're thinking about it, but it's more of a preference. Let's hold on one second. Let's look at Luke 14 and 26. Read that.
If anyone comes to me and does not hate his father and his mother and his wife and his children, his brothers and sisters, and his own life too, he is unable to be my top ones.
Okay, very good. So Yeshua says that in order to be his disciple, you must hate your father and your mother and your wife and your children and your brothers in order to be his disciple. We talking about literal hate, or we talking about preference? Because we're actually supposed to love.
Yeah, love your mother and your father.
I mean,
love your brother and your sister and yourself.
Right?
You can't say both and then mean that.
So we have to be able to think about, again, we have to be able to think about things from, and not we can't be so rigid, because when we sit up here and talk to each other, we use hyperbole all the time. We use words in ways that they're not defined to be used, like all the time. And if you sit up here and listen to everything that I say, and then read me what the definition of the word that I said, and say you said this, but I'm telling you what I mean, though. Mm-hmm. Right? But we didn't just make this up in these times. They spoke in idioms way back then. And so we have to think about that sometimes whenever we look at the scriptures again. And I just said, if we sit up here and look at how the word hate, how the word sonne is used in the scriptures, I challenge you to find it in a positive way. I bet you won't do it. I bet you won't do it. There's so many, there's hundreds of places where it literally means hate, right? But I don't know if that's how it's being used over here. I don't know that, especially in light of when we're looking at this over here and we look at Luke.
It might be because the Most High go out of his way to make her womb open and close the womb of another one. That gotta be that great of a situation to me. If he's gonna go that drastic with it, it's like Jacob is to the point where he hate her.
Well, I'm
Yeah.
saying that it could still be that we can talk about that too. But I'm saying it could still be on a level of preference because just the Most High is not a respecter of persons. He don't deal with this whole favorite thing. In terms of justice, he says that we can't operate in partiality like that.
And that's what I was going to say. I was going to say that the Most High is looking at loving his wife less than his other wife is hatred.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, the love should be equal.
Yeah.
And anything less than that is like, in his eyes, is like hatred.
Yeah.
So if I love this brother more than I love that brother, you know what I mean? That's like,
yeah,
the Most High with that. It's supposed to be love.
Mm-hmm.
No partiality, no favoritism.
So we look at it and it can rightly be called hate. If we just even gonna put it just at partiality, we can call it hate. Because again, we look at what Yeshua said, that's the thing that he's talking about. But at the same time, we know that he can't literally mean for you to hate your father and your mother. But what you cannot do is put them above the Most High. You can't look at what they're saying and put that above what Yeshua is having for you to do. And so I think that it's kind of a balance that we have to look at it at, and not kind of think about it kind of in this kind of rigid kind of a way. I think we kind of have to look at it kind of in a more fluid way based on the way that we see Yeshua over here using it. One must prefer Elohim or love him more than all else to be saved, period, point blank. You cannot put any one or thing above the Most High. And if you do that, you must hate the Most High, right? When we think about the idea of idolatry, if you put anything above him, he's putting that at idol status. And once you do that, because of the way that you're treating him, it's like hate. But I'm saying that sometimes in our minds, we might not, it's not like I got a feeling. It's not like how if I think about hate, I think about this strong kind of negative kind of a thing that I just, I can't even think about what I hate. There's probably some things, but just right now I just can't even, right? But whatever those things are, it's like a strong feeling. It's not like a neutral thing. But if we treat the Most High, if we put him in that neutral zone, he qualifies that as hate. So we're not thinking about it in like this overtly kind of intentional negative thing. We're just kind of just passively, he's over here, but this thing, I love this thing over here. He's looking at that like hate, though.
So is that like, so I'm just trying to understand. So, the verse, and I don't know where it is in the Bible, but it talks about being lukewarm.
Mm-hmm.
And where like, the Most High
Revelation
out of his mouth because you're lukewarm, you're not hot or cold. Is that the type of thing you're talking about now? Like he really dislikes this.
Yes.
Okay.
I think that's second chapter of Revelation. I'm not sure exactly. Somebody gotta look it up. I think it's Revelations. I know it's Revelation. I think it's the second chapter. I'm saying that is exactly the point here. Lukewarm.
Third chapter.
Lukewarm is, what is it?
3:16.
Yeah. What does it say exactly?
It says, so then because thou art lukewarm and neither cold nor hot. I will spew thee out of my mouth.
I mean, he would rather for you to be cold, because then if you're cold, at least I know where we stand at. But if you in the middle, you on the fence, that's even worse. You got 1 foot in, 1 foot out. You can't tell the difference. You can't tell that one is way better than the other. And you want to sit up here and just kind of be in both arenas? You don't want that. But I'm saying, like, from the doer's perspective, you're kind of, it's not like you're aggressively moving towards the cold. It's like, I like the cold and I like the hot. Both of them are kind of, agreeable to me, like, right? But he wants for us actually to hate the other side, though. And so the inability to choose, he's taking it as hate, even though from the doer's perspective, we're not kind of aggressively moving towards the other side. But that's how he's taking it, though. He take it like that. When we just kind of passively kind of move along in our spiritual existence, he's saying, I don't want that. I want the hotness. And so we can look at the same thing. We look at this over here where, he aggressively longed and desired after the younger daughter, right? And the other one, I mean, she had nice qualities. If I could look into her eyes all night long, but that's as far as it was, right? And so she does indeed get that kind of that hate status, right? Deuteronomy 6:5. What that say?
It says, "You shall love Yahweh your Elohim with all your heart and with all your being, with all your might."
So when we think about that right there, that all is in there every time, with all of your heart, not just with your heart. There's a word there that is giving you the fullness. He wants the fullness of your heart and your soul and your might, your strength, all of it, right? That's what he wants. And that's what we're literally commanded from him, right? That's the way that we love him. And if we're not doing that, that's like you say, that's we in that lukewarm category over here.
But we know he's a jealous Elohim.
That's
So
what
you
he
can apply
says.
that to
He says
marriage
name.
of a man and a woman.
He says name is jealous.
You can apply it to a man and a woman. If either or is not loving, full committed, then
And just kind of as a side note, I think this is one of the problems that we see with this whole idea of kind of this kind of non-exclusive relationships that we have. It's so easy to be able to find things about people, especially loved ones, that causes you to be pulled towards one more than the other. And Jacob wasn't able to figure out the thing. He wasn't able to get the balance. I'm sure there's people that could get the balance, but he wasn't able to do it. He wasn't able to have the balance. He wasn't able to let the preferential treatment be something that was just internalized. That thing was manifest and it was known by all parties. And so he pays for that, right? So just if we just look, right, just read 30 and 31 again. Okay.
It says, and he also went into Rachel, and he also loved Rachel more than Leah, and he served with Laban still another 7 years. And he always saw that Leah was unloved, and he opened her womb But Raquel was barren.
And so we see over here, and then so that translation puts unloved there again. King James says hated. Now what we see over here is the fact that the Most High steps in to the situation, right? Now you're not gonna sit up here and operate in this partiality, right? I'll fix you. The one gonna be, and think about this now. The mothers of Israel, they had some problems, didn't they? They had this problem with being barren, and but Leah though, and Leah, she's blessed out the door.
You kiss her, she
Out the door, she's blessed,
yes.
right?
It seemed like the beautiful ones were the ones that be having problems.
Well, I mean, I guess it talks about all of those other ones too. Like Sarah was like that, and Rivka was like that, where he had to sit up there, and both of them, got had to be lied about because of their beauty and all these things. And then we see with Rachel, there's no difference in terms of the fact that they are these beautiful people, and then there's barrenness that's attached to it. Now, again, I'm saying that I'm not taking the beauty away from Leah, because it don't sit up here and say that she's ugly. But I'm saying, comparatively speaking, Rachel was the more beautiful one. She had way more qualities than Leah had. But my personal thoughts on the matter, I think, is that we can see what it says over here. But so just because we can see, keeping on going here, just because we can see there is this idiomatic concept at play, is not to say that this preferential treatment does not feel like actual hatred, right? And that's obvious with when we look at Leah and the conception of these children. Now, let me just say this. First of all, Leah, to be so hated, Jacob visited her tent and often, obviously, right? So it wasn't like no immaculate conception over here, right?
The first date, you know what I'm saying? Like,
It's so I'm saying that there's things I'm saying that lead to my thoughts. These are my thoughts, that it's about preference, but the preference is real, because we know that it affected her greatly. And in spite of the fact that the Most High blessed her womb, it still kind of wasn't enough to kind of build herself up to the place where she was able to feel good about the blessings that was happening, even from the beginning, right? Read this verse 32.
Leah conceived and bore a son. She called his name Reuben, for she said, "For Yahweh has looked on my affliction, because now my husband is going to love me."
Right, and so in spite of the fact that her womb, it says, was opened, and then she receives a son as a firstborn, which from a cultural standpoint is what you want. But this is just the beginnings of of her situation in terms of, her needing these things to know. Here, just sit over there. Him needing these things, her needing these things in order to kind of get by. Like, this is literal affliction to her. This preferential treatment that is going on over there. And so 33.
She conceived again and bore a son, and said, because Yahweh has heard I am unloved, he gave me this son too. And she called his name Shimeon.
Okay, so again, like, it don't change, right? Just keeps on going, right? He keeps on going back to hate it. Yeah, he keeps on going back because now the thing about it is that he got to be there in order for these babies to come, right? And it don't talk about, it's not as if he's not seeing Rachel, because there must be there's something that's going on that's causing her to feel unloved, right? So he's obviously going over there too, right? If he was only seeing Leah, that would be one thing, but he obviously is seeing Rachel also. But the difference is that she is just being unfruitful. But still, in spite of these things, she is having this, she's got a complex at this point that she can't get over. And two sons don't fix it. 3 sons don't fix it. What do verse 34 say?
And she conceived again and bore a son, and said, now this time my husband is joined to me, because I have borne him 3 sons. So his name shall be Levi.
3 sons don't fix it. This is the one that's going to join us together. She still is like that. 4 sons don't even fix it. What?
And she conceived again and bore a son, and said, now praise Yahweh. So she called his name Judah, and she ceased bearing. That's where it stopped.
Okay, so she made it all the way to 4, where now she's able to praise, I guess, over here. She's able to be somewhat content after she done had 4 sons, right? When you think about Israel in general, there's 12 tribes. There's 12 sons of Israel. Half of those come from Leah, the one that was unloved. Right? She had these 4 initially. Her handmaiden, I think, has 2, and then she has 2 more later. And so the majority of the sons come from her.
The tribes of Leah.
The ones that were hated, right? And then look at who's over there. Yehuda. You got the kingly line comes from her. The priestly line comes from her. And so when you think about this this thing, and not to try to diminish it because it's definitely real. But you see over here with all of them really that there was problems because Rachel has problems with how she feels about her situation because of the fact that she was favored and then was barren and then couldn't have no babies, right? So you got all of this stuff that's going on all because of this whole partiality thing, which leads us back to this thing about this idea of love and being able to think about love from a perspective of, from the most highest perspective and not kind of this physical, kind of this carnal, reactionary type of love, because it is love, but it's not the love that the Most High is calling for us to have. It's not that true love that he's calling for us to have, because this is where it gets you, right? I love this or that, but I only love this or that because of how it makes me feel, right? It's real love, the connection that I have for dried mangoes. I'm so attached to these things. They're great, but it's only like that because they're chewy and they're sweet and they're delicious, right? There's a reason why I love them, right? But what about the thing that don't really do anything for me? Like, can I still love that thing? I hate rutabaga. I bet it's good for me, but I don't like it. It's like a root vegetable. Actually, it probably tastes like a sweet potato. Some. It's close. But the point is that having these great feelings for a thing is always attached to something that you receive back in return. And that's not love. If I can only love you as long as you're able to be nice to me, yeah, then that's not what love is. And so we have to be able to differentiate between this physical love and like a true, real love and know the difference, because that's how we know that we're of Elohim, and when we're walking in love. Because, there's a difference between me doing something for someone that I know I'm going to get kickbacks from, as opposed to me doing something for someone that doesn't have anything to do with getting anything back in return, right? The other part is love. Somebody said over here, men and women still do this today. Men will sleep with and make babies with women they don't truly love, and women will allow this even though they know his true feelings. Yeah. I mean, it's unfortunate that we live in a society really that we have so much this dysfunction, and then we see over here with them where we had kind of a somewhat functional situation that kind of dips into the realms of dysfunction within it.
Due to the lack of love,
right?
It would have all been solved with,
yeah,
loving.
Yeah,
as much as you love.
Yeah, he could have did it. He could have did it right. He could have did it.
100 traps.
Yeah. Okay, let's go through this a little bit over here. What do I have here? Oh, Ephesians chapter 5. Ephesians chapter 5, starting with the 22nd verse. We're gonna go through this some and then bring it back. Yeah, just start reading that verse 22.
It says, wives, subject yourselves to your own husbands as to the master, because the husband is the head of the wife, also the Messiah is the head of the assembly. He is the savior of the body. But as the assembly is subject to the Messiah, also let the wives be to their own husbands in every respect. Keep going.
Yep.
Husband, love your wives as Messiah also did love the assemblies. He gave himself for it in order to set it apart and to cleanse it with the washing by the water of the word, in order to present it to himself a splendid assembly, not having spot nor wrinkle or any of this sort, but that it might be set apart and blameless. In this way, husbands ought to love their own wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself. For no one ever hated his own flesh, but feeds and cherishes it, as also the master does the assembly, because we are members of his body and his flesh and of his bones. For this cause, man shall leave his father and his mother and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. This secret is great, but I speak concerning Messiah as the assembly.
Okay, so we read all of that to say when we look over here at Yeshua describing the relationship between a man and his woman, a husband and his wife, he says this secret is great. This is a great mystery, it says in the King James. But what he's talking about is concerning the Messiah and the assembly. So the same way that we understand the way a husband and a wife are to be able to deal with each other is the same way we are able to understand how we as an assembly relate to Messiah. He calls this a great mystery. And so when we think about, looking at Yaakov and Rachel and Leah and marriage in general, right? When we able to look and learn about marriage and how it should be and how we deal with each other as man and woman, we're able to understand how we relate to Messiah. Look at John 2:1-3.
It says, and on the third day there was a wedding in Cana of Galilee, and the mother of Yeshua was there, and both Yeshua and his taught ones were invited to the wedding. And when they were short of wine, the mother of Yeshua said to him, they have no wine.
When we look at Yeshua, when he got on the scene, the first miracle that he did was at a wedding. Yeshua and his very first miracle is at a wedding. It could be nothing, but it could be everything. It could mean absolutely nothing, just a mere coincidence that the first miracle that he ever performed was at a wedding. But it could be something with great significance. And we can couple the fact that Paul talks to us about a marriage, a husband and a wife. He tells us that there's a great mystery that lies within that helps us to be able to relate to Messiah. And then lo and behold, we see with Yeshua, when he comes on the scene, this thing that he does, this turning water into wine at this wedding, right? So the marriage and its significance with the bride of Messiah. So we want to talk about just these things real quick before people expire. The payment, right? The mohar, the payment, the agreement, the conditions of the union. The possessor, the actual husband. The betrothal, married but not dwelling together, that space and time when the payment and the agreement have already been made, but there's no dwelling of the two parties yet. And the actual wedding, the consummation, and the dwelling. Okay, so we think about the payment. What did Yaakov pay? What did he pay?
7 years later.
He paid 7 years labor for a wife. Huh?
Was it 14? Then he have to do 7 for the
He
other?
paid 14.
years and a month.
He paid 14 years and a month. Actually, when you think about Rachel, that's what he paid 14 years for. He only paid 7 for Leah, but it's double for Rachel because he that's who he wanted first, right? So he literally paid 14 years of labor for a bride. What did Yeshua pay? What did Yeshua pay? What's his payment?
It's fresh.
His life. That's like what we seen over there in Ephesians.
I don't say life, but he still lives. That's what I said.
Well, he died and he's died. He's dead and alive, right? It says, what did this say over here? Or set apart, cleanse it, present himself a splendid spot. 28. In this way, husbands ought to love their own wives as their own bodies. Oh, that's not the verse. What verse am I looking for? No one ever hated his own flesh, but feeds and cherishes it. Members of the body. Did he say, what did he? What verse am I looking for? Oh, 25. Husbands, love your wives as Messiah also did love the assembly and gave himself for it. He gave himself for the assembly, right? He gave his literal life, right? His payment is the blood. 1 Corinthians 6:20 says what?
For you were bought with a price, therefore esteem Elohim in your body and in your spirit, which are of Elohim.
Right. Again, the price that was paid was the blood of Messiah. Oh, what that say right there?
Know that you were redeemed from your futile behavior, inherited from your fathers, not with what is corruptible, silver or gold, but with the precious blood of Messiah, as a lamb, unblemished and spotless.
Right. So you was redeemed or bought back from your futile behavior, inherited from your fathers, not with things that is going to die and fade away, but by the blood. So that was the price. It's a pretty steep price, I would say. Yeah, read that one. That we talking about Exodus, Israel. Also, there was a payment for Israel. So there's a payment for Israel. There's a payment that Yaakov made with his thing. But this over here, Exodus 6 and 7 is what was paid for Israel. What that say?
Say therefore to the children of Israel, I am Yahweh, I shall bring you from under the burdens of the Mizrahites, and shall deliver you from their enslaving, and shall redeem you with an outstretched arm and with great judgments. I shall take you as my people, and I shall be your Elohim. And you shall know that I am Yahweh your Elohim, who is bringing you from out under the burdens of the Mizrahites.
Yeah. So when we think about the idea of redemption or that payment that was paid, we see over when we think about this idea that again, when we see with Jacob, we see with what Yeshua has done, we see with what Israel went through as being like unto a bride of the Most High. There's always a payment. And we think about redemption, where it says, I shall redeem you. That is talking about a payment being made. There's always an agreement. There's always an agreement. Yaakov, what was his agreement that he made? His agreement.
You would do the 7 years.
His agreement was the payment.
Yeah, what's the payment?
His agreement was the payment. He agreed that he was going to be in servitude for this 7 years, and then the 7 years was the payment. So in that way, his payment and his agreement are kind of intertwined with each other.
I added that up. What it would cost for 7 years worth of labor at minimum wage today. It would be 100,000 for 7 years, 201,000 for 14.
Wow, that's a lot. I think it took me 3 months. It took me 3 months, I think, to save up for that little piece of diamond that Tirsa got on her thing. It was about 3 of my little bit of money that I was making at the time, wages. And I was probably making just about a bit of a wage at that time. I think that's a lot. That's a lot. When you think about it, without even looking at the numbers, 7 years is a lot. I don't think the number was 7 years of servitude. I don't think that was like the going rate for a daughter out here.
It was like, excessive from the beginning.
Yeah, just from the jump, it was a lot.
Yeah, like 50 shekels or something.
I want to say that sounds more reasonable. I think.
Throw this 50 shekels and be done with it.
I want to
something, you know.
I want to say that was more along the lines,
So
not
it was
like
the ground around 50 shekels.
I want to
like
say
that.
that. I want to say that's what it was, not 7 years worth of shekels, whatever that adds up to be. I want to say that it was a little excessive just from the gate.
Yeah.
But it's a payment. You know what I mean? And there's agreement.
Agree, yeah.
I mean, if you can find that, see if you can find
I'm looking at that right now.
How many shekels does somebody even get over a year? What do you agree to? What do you agree to? What's your agreement? We know what our payment is, Yeshua. But what do you agree to? You agree to something.
Keeping his commandments, walking after Yeshua.
And it's the same thing now. When we think about, like, if you look over there in my house, we got our agreement right over there. That's our agreement. That's our ketubah right over there. I said what I was going to do, and then actually I wrote the whole thing. So I said what I was going to do, and then I also said what I wanted. Right? So some situations you might both people might bring what they bring into the situation.
I'm writing mine too.
I said what I wanted, and I said what I'm gonna give. I said both, right? And then we both agreed. That was an agreement. When we think about Israel, of course, agreed to whatever it is that Israel agreed to whatever it is that the Most High was gonna say. Whatever you say, we're gonna do it. That's what Israel said. And then we do the same thing whenever we look and we say that we want to make Yeshua our Lord and our Master. You basically saying the same thing. Whatever you say, we'll do it. When you say, I want you to be my master and my Lord, you're agreeing to whatever it is that he has to say, and as it relates to you. What did Yeshua agree to? Because there's agreement on both sides, right?
To be your mediator. To reconcile you.
When we think about, he definitely agreed to all of those things. When we think about where we started at in Ephesians in terms of Yeshua being the husband and the assembly being the wife, when he's agreeing to be our master, he takes on that role of the protector and the provider and the intercessor, right? And the mediator, all of that. He provides that covering for his assembly, right? And so it is a twofold thing. It's us agreeing for him to be our master and him actually operating in that role as our master. Exodus 19, 5 and 6. What does that say? Exodus 19, 5 and 6.
And now if you diligently obey my voice and shall guard my covenant, then you shall be my treasured possession above all the peoples. For all the earth is mine, and you shall be to me a reign of priests and a set apart nation. Those are the words which you are to speak to the children of Israel.
The Most High said that Israel was going to be his treasured possession. That is a personal possession, a special possession of property, his very special gift that he has, like his most favorite jewel, is who Israel was going to be for the Most High. Israel was going to be his most treasured, perfect, favorite, unique possession. Right? When we think about the idea of Yeshua, what is he being in terms of the husband? He is possessor. Right? We think about the role of the husband. We don't think about it in this kind of thought process in our westernized situation. But when we think about Yaakov becomes the possessor of his wives. Again, we go talk about the wife, the daughter going from covering to covering. She was protected. She was possessed by literally her father, right? She was protected by her father, where she had to even go from that one covering to the other, right? And then Yaakov comes and makes the agreement and pays the price, and then takes over that role, where the Most High, where we see over in what we just looked at in Exodus, in terms of the Most High being the possessor of Israel. And just like we see where Yeshua becomes the possessor of his body, that is you and I. Okay, so this word is a word for husband, Baal, which means husband over here, to have dominion, to rule over. In relation to marriage, it refers to a married woman or a woman to be married. Figuratively, is used in connection with Elohim's marriage to Israel, as well as Judah and Israel's marriage to daughters of foreign gods. So when we look at the role of a husband, and again, when we think about the idea of this whole kind of 1 foot in, 1 foot out thing, when you think about the idea of a husband, right, you have that there is that kind of connection where you don't have room for these kind of loose connections, right? And that was the problem with Israel, where Israel was going after these other gods and getting into these other relationships where already had a possessor, right? When we think about it in that kind of a context, it kind of causes it to be a little bit more understandable, I would say, because of the fact, if I'm your possessor, I'm your husband, how somebody else gonna come around and start telling you what to do? It doesn't make any sense, right? It doesn't make any sense to think about the idea of a husband and a wife, and then some other person comes around, some other man comes around and start telling you what to do, and then you start doing it. Right? But that's what happens though, right? Jeremiah 31 and 32, what does that?
So it's not like the covenant I made with their fathers in the day when I strengthened their hand to bring them out of the land of Mitzrayim, my covenant which they broke, though I was a husband to them, declares Yahweh.
Though I was a husband to them, right? So we know Jeremiah 31 is talking about the renewed covenant, and we still have that same context of a marriage. And so we can think about that. We can think about what we looked at in Ephesians chapter 5, where our relationship to Messiah is like unto marriage, and all of these things all go together. Okay, the betrothal, we saw that with Yaakov, right? Where I guess is another thing that we sit up here and attach to the 7 years, because the 7 years was the time of the betrothal. It was the agreement and the payment. All of those things was all rolled up into one situation in terms of, and when we especially see that when it gets to the second 7 years, where he says that he gave Rachel to Jacob as a wife, and then he did the 7 years. So we can see that they went through the processes, but they still needed to wait until they got to the time of betrothal. With Israel now, when we think about the period of betrothal with Israel, where could we put that out? I wonder. Where can we put the time of betrothal when we think about Israel? If the agreement happens at Sinai, if the payment happens at the Passover, at what point would we say is that kind of betrothal and not dwelling together, period. Am I having thoughts on that?
Well, what happened with it wasn't with them, so what? It would be when they was in Egypt.
Well, Egypt would have, but Egypt was before the agreement and the payment, though.
In the 40 years? But he was with them during that time.
Well, I would say
well, wait. Now, there's a time in between the agreement and the dwelling in the 40 years, though.
Oh yeah, there is.
Right? Because they got to set up everything.
Moses was on there.
On the mount.
They had to set up all of the things. He had to get the instructions, build the tabernacle, and then he came to dwell when they got the tabernacle.
When they was wilding out.
Well, what you mean with the golden calf and all that?
Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm saying there's a space and time when he's on the mountain, and then he comes and dwells in the tent whenever they make the tent and make it ready.
Right.
So you do have a space where they're connected by payment and agreement, but he's not dwelling there until he comes and dwells with them. So we do see that even though the majority of the time is dwelling, because in the wilderness he led them through the wilderness.
We're waiting for that again.
But now, but you talking about with Yeshua now is a different thing, right? Where we got the payment, we got the agreement, but he's not dwelling. We're his, we're connected, and we've been betrothed, but he said that he's going to go away and prepare a place and then come back for us, right? And so we now are in that whole betrothal part where we're married but not dwelling. And then we got the wedding consummation dwelling part, the finish of the situation. We saw with Yaakov what he had to go through. We seen that, right? With the Most High, we saw that a couple of times. We saw when Moses, acted as the priest, and he did all the consecration, like he did all the things the high priest does, and the Spirit came and dwelled on the thing. We seen that also when the original temple got erected, how that was kind of like a big kind of a coming together thing, right? And then in terms of Yeshua, we see that in Revelation in terms of Yeshua coming and actually coming and dwelling and gathering his body together. Okay, so that's all of the slides. And so we say that again, when we look at the Torah portion for this week, we see all of the components of marriage. We see the dysfunctional components and the functional components. But when we think about the idea of marriage and what it represents, it helps us to be able to look and understand what Yeshua has done for us, and how all these things kind of relate to each other. Okay, does anybody have any thoughts or questions or comments about any of these things?
Yeah, I think I only found that the 50 shekels was if he was found with the woman. And
that's what you had to pay if you right.
That's a penalty.
Yeah. But I think that was the price, though.
Oh.
I think that might have been the price.
I mean, because in Exodus it talks about the bride price, but there's no price.
It don't say what it is.
Yeah.
But I think if you overstep your bounds, you ended up just having to pay the price though.
Right.
So I think that's what it was.
I think, and there's other thing I was looking to, the father could determine the price.
Yeah.
So
Right. So I
I
guess at that,
if he,
maybe it's custom, maybe 50's customary,
yeah,
but you got the right to make it be whatever you want to be, like 7
yeah.
years.
So yeah, I did see something about
Yeah,
that.
yeah. Okay, any other thoughts? Anybody else? Okay, so that being said, for now, I guess that's all we're gonna deal with. Until next time. All right, Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat shalom.